Well, hi there. Welcome back to our deep dive into PMBOK 5th edition. Today is Module 6. We're going to go through planning for and identification of project stakeholders. This is sections 13.1 and 13.2 in your PMBOK manual, which just brings me to this. You need to have this document in your hand as a reference for a couple of reasons. You can follow along with it as we go through our course. You need to read it yourself to reinforce what you learn here. And copyright rules, because of our class, you need to have this in your hand so that we're good. So please, get one if you don't have it. By the way, 13.1, if you look on your table 13-1 right here, and you notice I use mine quite a bit. You're familiar with this. We've seen this many times here. Down here's our initiating process. Remember, there's only two processes in the initiating process group. One was develop the project charter that we talked about in one of our earlier modules, and the other one is identify stakeholders, only two. So that's another reason why we're doing stakeholders now and not wait until chapter 13. So we're doing these in a logical order, and this one is very logical. So let's talk about identify stakeholders. Okay, so stakeholder management is a key, fundamental, and it's a critical process to do as we're doing our project. We need to do this early. As soon as you know there's a project coming, you need to start sorting out your stakeholders. And you're going to do this almost until the end of the project, because you don't know who's going to pop up late in the game that you may not have identified, and they're going to cause you grief on your project. So you need to identify these people more than you may think at this time. So what is stakeholder management all about? It's about the processes. Everything in PMBOK is about processes. So it's the process to identify all the stakeholders. They could be people, they could be groups, they could be organizations, whatever. And you need to analyze their expectations about your project. You need to analyze them, and you need to effectively engage them at all times in project decisions so that the project can be executed with all due considerations from all stakeholders, no matter who they are, where they are. If they can at all possibly affect or influence your project, positively or negatively, you need to identify them and put them in what we're going to call, or what PMBOK calls officially, the stakeholder register. So, stakeholder management process group processes, 13.1. How many are there? Well, there are 4. And here they are. Now, under stakeholder management process knowledge area, there's identify the stakeholders. Now, what I've done here, by the way, is I've clipped off the top of the table 3.1, which is our knowledge area process group matrix with all 47 processes. I've just clipped off the top so that we see this, and I've shown just the project stakeholder management knowledge area in it. So let's place these activities or these processes in the proper process group. Initiating process. Again, there are only 2 processes in the initiating process group at all in PMBOK. One is prepare your project charter. Number 2 is identify the stakeholder. That's why it's so critical we do this early in the game. It's an initiating process. You should do this before you do anything else. Then, once we identify it, we then go off and plan how we're going to manage these people. And the plan stakeholder management is a planning process. All of your management plans for all of the remaining 9 knowledge areas they all have a plan. Scope management plan, human resource management plan, whatever it is. In this case, it's stakeholder management plan. They're all planning processes. Now, once we plan, and the project evolves enough where we can start executing the project, we then go into managing this engagement with all these stakeholders we have. We need to manage the engagement during project execution. Manage. And then under monitoring and controlling, which you recall, pervades everything from beginning to end of your project. Monitoring and controlling, then we control stakeholder engagement. So we monitor it, we manage it, control it, and there are no closing processes in stakeholder management. So here is our, from now on, for the rest of our knowledge areas, you'll see this kind of presentation. We'll be showing you this, how it maps out, that one knowledge area, and then we're going to show you the knowledge area overview. In this instance, it's stakeholder management overview, and it shows all of the processes. So here's your 4 processes. So in this module 6, we're going to look at 3.1 and 3.2 in detail. So here's our input, tool and technique, and output diagram. And from our prior modules, you should not be confused now with these various views of these items. So you know what these are. So again, a single output of this process is the stakeholder register. A very important key document, and if you don't have one, if you've never done one, you should really seriously consider about creating one even after the fact in your project, and we'll show you just what a good one looks like. And again, this is only one of 2 initiating processes, as we mentioned. Here's what we're also going to see for all the remaining knowledge areas is the data flow diagram for that knowledge area. So here we have, again, this is a process. Remember, it doesn't have any bookends here. It's not like over here where this is an entity, happens to be the organization. Everything else are processes that are shown here. So what comes in, what do we have available to us as a tool to, or as an, to be able to create eventually our stakeholder register? All we have at this point in the game is our project charter. Let's go back there. Here's our project charter. It comes in. It has our high-level requirements. It has maybe a shot at a couple of stakeholders. We may know who they are because the business case and the business statement of work came in. Somebody prepared that. They're probably involved with the project. But even if they're not, they're still a stakeholder because they have knowledge of this project that's coming up. So what you do in the project charter, you list these people in the charter, and you call that a stakeholder list. Now, there's a difference between the stakeholder list, which is initially in the charter, and the stakeholder register, which is your official stakeholder documentation as a project document. And of course, a project charter is a project document also. But don't get confused if you're quizzed on this in a PMP exam about the difference between the stakeholder list, that's the very preliminary list in the charter, and the official stakeholder register, which is your working document of all stakeholders and all their attributes. So keep that in mind. The project management procurement documents come in, and why? Well, stakeholders may have an interest in some of the procurements that are outstanding out there, and you want to make sure, and they may have influence over a supplier. They may have a good relationship with an external supplier, which may be a benefit to you, or if you're trying to purchase things later on for the project, that particular stakeholder may be a detriment to you because they may be pushing for a certain supplier, whereas your analysis says, no, we really ought to buy it from this guy. So you need to know these things up front if some of those relationships exist. And as we'll see in more detail coming up, certain organizational process assets and environmental factors are at play here to help you identify the stakeholders. Once you do create the stakeholder register, it goes into the next process, stakeholder process, of then, now that we have that, we can plan what are we going to do with this? How are we going to manage these stakeholders? So we do the plan second. This is the only process, knowledge area, where the plan comes after, well, other than doing your project charter. So I guess there's 2, but it's the only one of 2 where the actual management plan comes after another prior process. So here we first identify and then we do the stakeholder management plan. And once that's done, see, the stakeholder register goes out and to collect requirements because these stakeholders, they are your primary source for detailed requirements. They're the ones that you're building this for, so you need to collect your requirements from them. It goes into quality management, the stakeholder request, because, the stakeholders, they have a vested interest, some more than others. So, they're concerned with the quality of the product that's going to be output. Communications plan, of course, very key plan because you're going to communicate with these stakeholders in various degrees of information depending on what they want. And whatever it is you communicate to any of them, it has to have value to them. So you need to ask them what it is exactly they need to help them in their job and to help you support the project. So it goes out to risk management. Risk management is extremely important. Some stakeholders are way more risky than others, so you need to know who you're dealing with and how to approach them so that risk doesn't get out of control, so that they're a benefit to you rather than a detriment, and we'll see methods of doing that. And finally, procurement management plan, again, because they may have some interest in what you're buying, and it may be a conflict of interest that you need to avoid and smooth over, or maybe some other reasons, but that's why procurement is a receiver of the stakeholder register. So in a minute now we're going to get into the actual inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. Okay, so let's talk about the actual inputs, tools, and techniques, and outputs of the identify stakeholders process. What are our inputs? Well, early in the game, when we start to really identify our stakeholders, we only have the project charter and its attachments, which are the business case and the business scope of work and so on. So the project charter gives us insights into external, internal parties that are related to the project, that could be affected by the project. Again, at the high level, we identify who we know, or organizations or whatever, at that point in time. Sponsors, if we know who the sponsor is, or we wouldn't know who the sponsor is because we've got the charter. Actually, you may be working on the charter as you're identifying your stakeholders, but at some point you'll know exactly who the sponsor is. So he's very critical. He's your key person. Okay, and customers, you know, who's going to be the ultimate benefit of the project. Could be the sponsor, could be, you know, an organization. Maybe you're building a project for an external company. You know, whoever they are, you need to know them. Team members, your project team, they're stakeholders. Of course, they have a vested interest in this project because they're working on it. And you need to nurture them and develop them so you get the best out of them, so you get the best project deliverables. There could be groups who are interested in your project. Maybe you're building out a new help desk system. Well, your whole help desk support crew is a group, and they certainly have a vested interest in what you're doing because it's their job, and they're going to be using the product that you're delivering to them. Department, customer service department, of which perhaps the help desk is a unit of it. So the entire customer service department is a stakeholder itself, and all the people in it. I mean, you know, we could end up with many, many, many stakeholders, but that's okay. You need to know who they are. Many of them you may, you know, not need to participate a great deal with, but whoever they are, you do need to participate with them and engage them in some degree. And whoever you think of, there are others. And the others is really nebulous, but those are the ones that may get you in the end. So you really need to find out everyone who's involved in this project or could be affected by it. Remember, active, passive. There are a lot of passive people who are maybe just sitting back waiting to say, well, when this starts getting too close, this project, I'm going to start making noise, and you know, because I don't want this to happen to me. I like my little help desk tool here. I don't want to change. They may be causing trouble. So you need to know who they are, and you have to manage them. Procurement documents that are available to help you identify your stakeholders. Contracts, okay, people in contracts. You may have, again, you may have blanket orders for some product or service that will apply to your project eventually. Then there'll be stakeholders, and so they are now, if you want to list them if you know them, suppliers as a whole. So it could be internal, external to your project. Now your environmental factors that come into play here are really something. Your culture, your structure, and you'll see a lot of these repeat in all knowledge areas, but in some, they're not always the same. So in this context, you know, your culture, of course, and the nature of your stakeholders, what they think, what their risk attitude is, you know, how they like you as a person, as a project manager, how they think of the project itself. All these aspects, you know, come into play in environmental factors. Remember, you need to, why are we doing this to begin with, stakeholders? You need to learn about these people. And you remember, environmental factors mean learn. You need to learn this. It's learn stuff of which you have no control. You're going to try and apply some level of management and control against these people. But you know, you may not be entirely successful, but you need to mitigate the problems that they may cause you. Or you may want to maximize and leverage their influence and power that they have as perhaps a manager or a senior person or whatever, or as a particular subject matter expert. You want to maximize that leverage to your benefit, so you can go both ways with stakeholders. Trends, practices, their habits, you know, and we'll see about habits and their attitudes in the stakeholder register, because you're going to figure that out and you're going to know how you want to handle these people. You want to morph them from a lesser effective person for you to a more effective person for the project. Organizational process assets, again, these are the things that are just available to you from your company. You may have a template, and hopefully you do. If not, you know, we'll show you one that works fairly well, which you could adopt if you like. And but stakeholder register templates may be available from your organizational assets. Just reuse it, save yourself a lot of time. There may be some processes and procedures that go along with it, on, you know, just how you fill it out and manage it. Archived lessons learned from past projects, how they tried to do this function and either were very successful or they failed and they fixed it. You need to know what they did so you can avoid that or capitalize on good things. And you will then see past stakeholder registers. If you have a template in your company, they should look like that template, more or less, unless they've tailored for some reason their processes for a particular project and the stakeholder register has been modified a bit. So those are the inputs at the early stage of the game. This is all you have to go on. Now, what do you do with all that stuff? Well, you do what's called stakeholder analysis. You systematically gather and analyze everything you can about the people, the groups that are involved in your project or could be involved, whether they know it or not. If they don't know it and they will be involved later, that's called unaware. And what we want to do is change the unaware for those persons into either, you know, supportive or aware, or, you know, just so that they don't later on say, oh, geez, look at this project. I think we ought to be doing this instead over here. You don't want that to happen. You want to do that way up front. So qualitative, quantitative information. You know, qualitative is what they think, their attitudes. Quantitative, you know, how many of them are there? There may be a lot, but you need to determine whose interests of all these people, these stakeholders, groups, whatever, need to be managed. And that's your stakeholder register, goes in there. Identify relationships. You want to leverage these people to build partnerships with you and the project so that they feel included. They feel like you appreciate their thoughts, their comments, their expectations, and they may come up with some requirement that, oh, wow, I'm really glad I talked to you, and you put that in your requirements list. Determine how and when to influence these people. It's just a people game, and you need to play it well to be successful. Here's a chart right out of the PMBOK here. Power and interest grid. What you can see here, here's power on the left, here's interest on the bottom, and now we're talking about your stakeholders. You want to do this for every stakeholder because it will reveal a great deal about how you can approach these people. You know, up here, if it's very high power, very high interest, I'll just say maybe it's the CIO for some reason. Let's just say that it's him. Let's say he's B. This is B is your CIO guy or lady. He's up here, which means he's very powerful in the organization, and he has a very high interest in this project. And let's say it's a help desk, rebuild. He would be interested because technology is part of that project, so he has a very vested interest in what's going on here. So he's up there. And how we like rate this person, let's say this is a scale of 1 to 10 on both axes. So right up here, B, the CIO, would be maybe a 9 by 6. So 9 times 6, 54. He'd give him a rating of 54 on your stakeholder register, as we'll see. And you do that likewise. You place all your stakeholders, wherever they are, you give them their little rating score, and you put it in the stakeholder register. And as we'll see, the purpose of that is to help you you sort them by score. So the highest numbered score are the people that you really want to pay the most attention to because they have the most power and interest for this grid. There are other grids too that you could use, but this one is a primary one, and it gives you all this good information. The other ones are over here on the right. There's one that has power by influence, very powerful. Somebody could be very powerful but not really have much influence. So you want to show that in a graph like this, but the axis would be power and influence. Another graph like this would be the influence versus their impact. You know, they have very high influence, and what they're able to really make an impact with that influence or not, depending on how you place them. There's a third model called a salience model that we should look at later. But it's similar. It's how does a stakeholder impact your project, good or bad? Here it is here. Power interest, we saw that. Here's the power influence. Again, here's D up here, very low power, very low interest, but even so, he's a big talker. He knows who to talk to in the upper ranks, so he does have influence, although not power. But if he influences a powerful person, that may happen over here. Let's see now over here in the influence impact. His very low impact for this person here. Now maybe he'd be up here and he could impact the CIO up here B, but rank your people according to these graphs. You have these 3 different kinds of rankings, which are good to help you at least rationalize who the very important people are. And here's your salience model. See what it says? Here's power, what the power these people have. Are they a legitimate person with what they're doing? What's the urgency for them? And things overlap. So over here, dormant, discretionary, demanding, dominant, dangerous, dependent, definitive. What you'd do here is you'd place your stakeholders, A, B, C, D, however many, you'd place them in the appropriate areas, and you'd use these numbers in your stakeholder register to, again, help you rank them. So these are stakeholder analysis. This is analysis. You're analyzing these people into what how they would impact, influence you or your project or others, influence others behind your back, perhaps. Or if you want to leverage them, they could influence others to your benefit to get them, because now they have power over them and influence, or you may not have influence over a third party. They have the influence. They can convince them to work with you, and then that third party will be a benefit to you eventually. So now we're going to look in a minute at the tools and techniques given those inputs on how we proceed to identify our stakeholders. Okay, we're back with tools and techniques. We're going to continue looking at the tools and techniques. We just saw stakeholder analysis and how it can help us put some quantification to our stakeholders as we rank them by score. So we can determine, that helps us determine who we really want to talk to the most, who are, at the top of the list. Now that doesn't mean the people at the bottom of the list, we don't need to talk to, we do. And we may want to bring those people up to a higher score. We can do that by trying to influence their behavior and attitude and things like that. And as project manager, that's one of the skills, one of the skill sets a good project manager has to have, is to be able to influence these people, negotiate them, bring them onto your side of the fence. So another tool here, in addition to analysis, is expert judgment. Again, here, this is people that that can help you. Whoever has had experience in creating stakeholder registers, in dealing with difficult people, for example, with skill sets in morphing people onto your side. You need to talk to these people. How did they do it? Can they help you? Get guidance whenever you need it. You're not there alone, and nor should you be. So get help when you need it through expert judgment. And you may need to hold some meetings, because you're not going to do all that analysis yourself. You and your team, will sit in a meeting and create, populate those power influence, impact grids, and so on, so that you're all satisfied, and then create your stakeholder register. So the single output of identify stakeholders is the stakeholder register. Stakeholder identification information, obviously name, their organization, their location, their role, just who are they, where are they, what do they do in the company or outside the company. Your assessment information from the grids, your main expectations of them, once you interview them. You're not going to get all this at once. This is iterative, progressive elaboration. You'll continue to talk to these people, gain more information, go back and get more what you need from them. But you want to know what are their main expectations with this project. They may not even know there's a project, but if they're influenced by it and they're impacted later, they're going to want to be aware of it early. What's their potential influence on the project? Maybe if it's phase projects, they may not care about phase 1, 2, and 3 of what you're producing, but phase 4, oh man, once you get there, I want to get involved with that phase. So you need to know when their interest is perked during your project. And then you want to classify them as internal, as external. Now here's the things in the stakeholder register that I mentioned earlier. These are PMBOK qualifications or characteristics of a stakeholder. This person can be a supporter of the project. Says, yeah, great project, let's get on with it. They could be neutral. Says, okay, fine, project, I don't care, go ahead. Okay, you don't really want that. You want to turn them into a supporter to give you some extra benefit. They could be a resistor. You can say, I don't want that project. I don't care. Why was that approved? I'm going to talk to somebody. I don't want this project. It's going to impact me. I like doing my job the way I'm doing it. It's going to change everything. No, I don't like it. Bad thing. You need to know this early so you can work with them, show them the benefits of the project, work with their managers perhaps to bring them on board. They could be a leader, which is better than a supporter. They say, this is a great project. Can I help you? What can I do to get this thing going, to get the people you need? What can I do? Great person. You really would like to have many people. You don't want them all like this, because then that may be overbearing and do more than you want. But you want to turn people from a resistor into a supporter at least. But leaders are good in the right context. And then you have the unaware people. They're like, that this person may be impacted eventually. They say, we got this new project. Oh yeah, it's coming up. Well, I didn't know that. Well, let me keep you involved, because eventually, you're going to get folded into some aspect of the project, whatever it might be. So, oh yeah, great. Okay, now they may be neutral. Or they may say, oh wow, I didn't know that project, let me help you. They're a supporter. You want to turn these people into a help aid for you. And so don't stop. Find all the stakeholders. It can only help you. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk in detail about the stakeholder register that we have here, and we're going to come back to that in just a minute. Okay, so now let's talk about the output of process 13.1, identify stakeholders. Here's a visual of an actual stakeholder register. Perhaps this template is available in your company or something similar to it. If not, here's a reasonable example of a good, fully populated stakeholder register. Let's look at this. Of course, up here is your project name and phase, if that applies. But here's the big deal here. Your stakeholder names are listed down here. There may be 100 of these people. It depends on your project and how good you are at identifying those that can be involved or impacted by the project. So you'd have their name. Here's Fred. He's the CIO. He's in the IT department. He was not involved necessarily in the input to the organizational strategy that spawned this project. Okay, but down here, here's company A. The company itself was the benefactor. But here, Ken might have, who's the deputy CIO of infrastructure. Here you may have said that he was involved in. He was on the team that was involved in selecting the project because of the mission to improve customer service. That's their mission. So here's a project that fulfills that mission. New help desk will be improved, more efficiency, shorter wait times on the phone for customers. So it's a value to your company, and that could say that if they were involved. Now here's the 4 ratings that we did. Here's your power interest grid, power influence, power impact, and these are the scores. Remember, the product of the 2 axes, from 1 to 10 on both axes. Here, and here's your salience model, wherever they fit in those circles or where they overlapped or whatever. And the engine in the back of this spreadsheet, it's a spreadsheet in this instance, calculates a value for the salience model in the background so that you come up with our total ranking. And the ranking here is, you could sort it as it's sorted. So now you know up at the top there's a CIO. You want to like really watch him because see his salience model score here is a 5. Down here it's listed here what those were on that other graph. Dangerous. He's a dangerous person with what he does. He likes going around people's backs and getting things done for his personal political benefit in the company, for example. Dangerous. He could really be a problem. So just because of his score, and he's very powerful, he has interest, influence, and his impact of what he does is way up there based on the way you placed him in those grids, based on the intelligence you had about him at the time. So his score is up there. He's the one you really need to watch out for. And on top of this, he's the sponsor. Okay, this is a real strange situation. So he's dangerous, but he's a sponsor. What that means is he may just decide to take control of your project and do things behind your back or to you that you don't want to happen. So you got to manage this person very carefully, and so on down the line. Down here, now way down here you have Jill. She's a programmer. She may have to write some of the code, some of the programming that supports the help desk application, for example. She has, very low interest, very low power programmer, per se. Her influence isn't, she can say a lot, but it doesn't influence many people, no impact. She's just a really good programmer, so you want her on the team. And salience, she's a 6. She's dependent. She's a dependent person, so she depends on you to help her succeed in her job in your project. So because she's in the help desk, let's say, she's a customer, internal person. And also over here, we have communications. You won't know this right away until you interview your stakeholders, but you're going to want to know through interviewing processes, continuous contact, continuous engagement with your stakeholders at all levels. You want to know what are their communication requirements from them, and then when you create your communication management plan, you'll refer to this and you'll get a head start on how to prepare and fold them into your communication plan with what they want. You're going to ask them what are their major expectations. What is their major influence? Yeah, see here, sponsor, he's dangerous because his major influence, he calls the shots against the subject matter experts. He says, subject matter, you're the experts. What? Yeah, well, okay, but we're going to do it this way. That's a real problem. And we're going to see this in a minute. But this is real key important too. This is how you morph people onto your side of the fence. Their current engagement level, here they are down here. Remember, leading, supportive, resistant, neutral, unaware, whatever they are, and then where you want them to be. So here we have, this person here is a leader, but he could be a resistor. You want him to turn him into a supporter. This person is unaware. You may say, okay, leave him unaware. But whatever it is, don't overanalyze this particular presentation, this graph right here. But that's the idea. List where they are now, where you want them to be, rank them, how important they are, and for you to really pay attention to these or give a little less attention, but still attention to the people down at the bottom, because they may turn out to be somebody else, or they may turn out to be not what they appear to be at the beginning. So that's the stakeholder register. However you do it, you need to document these people somehow and intelligently create the plan now on how you're going to engage them so that they don't become a problem to you and your project, and hopefully become a supporter and help you in your effort. Here's a quick example of how this got filled in, by the way, as we saw. Here's B. That happens to be the CIO. So he's up here at 9. So we'd fill in, whatever it is here. I guess it's not the CIO, but whatever the product is, goes in these grids as we said. And the salience model, the same thing. So fill it in that way, and then rank them. Okay, so that's our stakeholder register. It's a key document. If you don't have one, you're going to be seriously in a problem world in managing your project if you don't know who all your influencers are, what their power is, what they think of your project, how they can help you, how they can't, and what you need to do to bring them on your side to help make them help you as a project manager either directly or maybe influence others where you can't influence them but they can, have them help you influence them so those other people are a benefit to you also. So in a minute we're going to go into our second process of this module today, which will be actually planning. Now that we know the stakeholders, initially anyway, we're going to plan how we're going to manage these people. We'll come back in a minute. Okay, now that we know the process to identify stakeholders, and by the way, this is continuous throughout your project, even to the end, you need to make sure you know who we're dealing with. Now that we know that, at least initially at this point, we're going to talk about creating our stakeholder management plan, how we're actually going to manage these people according to the kind of things we talked about a little earlier. So, stakeholder management plan. Here's our ITO diagram, input, tool, technique, and output. Here's our data flow diagram. Okay, our process is in the middle. the gray one. We've already looked at 13.1, and our stakeholder register now is available to us to do our planning. And again, we have organizational assets, influencers over here, our environmental factors, and the project management plan also comes in. At whatever state of the game it has developed so far, you bring that in. But the major input is stakeholder register. And when we're done, the major output is stakeholder management plan that goes into its next process. Where now we actually manage these people according to the plan during executing. And of course, stakeholder management plan also goes into collect requirements, because the plan is the how are you going to engage these stakeholders to wean out of them all of their specific requirements for this project. Because it's not just the sponsor, it could be many people. You know, Joe down in the basement in the filing office, you know, may have some good ideas about this project, and you need to hear them. And even though that person may not be authorized to make any decisions about the project, you take what they say, you talk to your key stakeholders, say, look, Bob down there said this. What do you think about that? And you'll say, wow, that's okay, we don't need that. Or say, oh, geez, that's good, let me incorporate that in our requirements. You never know how this may turn out, so talk to everybody. And we'll get into that in a lot of detail when we talk about scope and collecting requirements. So the inputs are the project management plan, and what in the plan might come in at this point or later, progressive elaboration at work, later as you continue to look at, refine, populate, adjust your stakeholder register. Because, you know, once you get your register done, these stakeholders aren't just going to sit there and never change. They're going to change their mind, their attitude, because of your project or because of something else. Maybe another big project comes up from another project manager, and now they say, oh, that's more important than me helping you on your project. So now you've lost some support maybe. You need to know that. So that's why you continually engage your stakeholders. So the plan, the project management plan, again, which is your guiding document with all the subsidiary plans that you use to create your deliverables, you know, it shows the life cycle selected, any tailored processes from PMBOK are in there if you need them. Maybe there's some special way you need to handle your stakeholder management plan, which we'll see that will be in there too. That's how you execute the work, PM plan. Your human resource requirements are in there, how you're going to control and monitor change and communication needs. And communication needs is important because, you know, you get that out of your stakeholders, what they need. So the plan has all this information in it to help you create your stakeholder management plan. Then, of course, you have your stakeholder register itself that we just did, insights into how to engage them. You know, supporter, unaware, neutral, resistor, important. How you rank them, power, influence, impact, that's all there to help you. Your environmental factors at play when you're doing this. According to PMBOK, they say when you're dealing with your stakeholders, you need to deal with everything in the environment. Anything that could possibly affect these stakeholders in the culture out there in the wild, you need to learn what those are, okay, and then deal with them. So culture, the org structure, the political climate, you know, like that CIO who supports the project, but if it doesn't go his way, he won't hesitate to go over your head and just say, no, I'm the CIO, you're doing it this way. A real problem. So you need to know what their political is, because he'd be doing that maybe in this instance to get, you know, political clout for himself. So you need to know these things. Organizational assets, again, PMBOK says you need to consider everything you have available to you to manage your stakeholders well. That's how important this stakeholder management knowledge area is. And again, in PMBOK 5, this is a new knowledge area. They pulled out bits and pieces of stakeholder management that was in the prior version. They made its own dedicated knowledge area, which is a very significant thing to have your own knowledge area in PMBOK. Very important. So they say consider everything. In particular, you want to look at the lessons learned from prior people doing projects. How did they handle their stakeholders? How did it go good? How did it go bad? And historical information about the project. How did the project go because of this? Anything that can help you do a better job that's available to you, you should look at. Tools and techniques in preparing the stakeholder plan, they look a lot the same as before, you know, and again, in this context of stakeholder management plan, they may be a little different, but expert judgment, you know, they can help you determine what your levels of engagement would be with particular stakeholders. Say, oh, you know, did you know this guy is, you know, does this, or this lady here, she'll be a real help to you if you just talk to her, you know, or watch out for this person, which you may not know, and then you adjust your stakeholder register. That's why it's a living document. You adjust it so that, you know, they're always fresh, and people may rank, they may change, you know, and that's good. It's a living document. Level may change over time. You're going to have meetings. Again, you're with your experts, with your project team, to help you determine these levels of engagement, the current ones and the desired, you know, resistor to neutral at least, or resistor to a supporter, better, those kind of things, and you use this to prepare your plan. Analytical techniques you could use at this point, compare the current engagement with the desired, analyze those things, see what can we do about it, and stakeholder assessment matrix, which is that part of the stakeholder register that we saw. And it is again, just to validate what we're talking about. Here is, of course, your stakeholder register that we saw. This thing in the front, they call that the assessment matrix. This is in the PMBOK. But you have your stakeholders, and here's your aware, neutral, resistance, where they are. C is current, D is desired. And you can translate that into more effective categories here of how you want to morph people from one thing to another, or leave them where they are. If they're supporters, and they say, great supporter, leave them as a supporter. This guy's a supporter. I need to help him lead things back there in the trenches, so you want to try and elevate him to a leader for you. So that's what this is. It's just a tool available, analytical tool available to you to help you fill out the engagement assessment over there. However you want to do it. Now remember this, none of these things we see, any of these examples like stakeholder register or a project chart or the format, none of these are actually recommended or mandated by PMBOK at all. Okay, it's whatever is in your organizational process assets first is what you would use. If you don't have anything available, make something up. Go out to the web, look for best practices, go to your PMI chapters and ask them. I mean, they're the subject matter experts. Ask them. Or, adopt something like this. But whatever it is, just keep in mind, PMBOK does not prescribe any kind of template or tool for you. It's up to you. But they show you the process that you would use whatever it is you come up with. So keep that in mind. There we go. Now, that's our tools and techniques. Now we're going to talk about outputs in a little bit of, well, let's look. We know what the stakeholder management plan is how are you going to manage your stakeholders. And the project documents that may be updated as a result of this process are, of course, the stakeholder register, which will get updated many, 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 many times throughout the project. And the project schedule, once you have one, may be impacted by your stakeholders. Their expectations may change, their requirements may change, and as a result, your schedule might change. So these are the two that are primarily may be impacted. Of course, remember, PMBOK says, but not limited to. So there could be others that are appropriate to update, but these are the primary ones they recommend. So that's our stakeholder management plan. Next time, we're going to get into managing now and controlling those stakeholder engagements. Now that we have the register and we have a plan, we're going to execute that plan, and we're going to manage and control our stakeholder engagement. We'll see that in Module 7.